Daily Detroit is brought to you by the community. Support our work at patreon.com/dailydetroit.
From Detroit's North End, hello and welcome to your Daily Detroit. On today's show, the big beer news is that Detroit's Atwater Brewing sold to a subsidiary of Molson Coors, with the terms of the deal undisclosed. But why did they sell? To answer that question and to look forward to what's next, later in the show I talk to Atwater owner Mark Rieth about just that. But we're going to start with a roundup of stories you should know around Southeast Michigan. I'm Jer Stays. It's Thursday, January 23rd, 2020. Let's get started. First up, thanks to an out-of-court settlement, Tesla is going to make some inroads in Michigan. The deal between the state and the company means the electric car maker can sell directly in our state. This hasn't been possible up till now thanks to Michigan's restrictive dealer protection laws. They force car makers to use dealers to sell and service the public. And prospective Tesla customers here had to travel to a neighboring state to make a purchase. That's going to change. The Michigan Attorney General's office announced yesterday that an agreement was reached over a 2016 lawsuit where Tesla sued the state because it denied it a dealership license. Although the law won't go away, they found some room in it, where Tesla vehicles will come with out-of-state titles that need to be transferred, and it has to be a subsidiary Michigan company that services the Teslas. It's also possible that dealers may sue in regard to the settlement. So let's quickly unpack this, because I think there's something deeper going on here than just what happens to Tesla, and it could majorly impact Michigan's economy. I'll walk you through my opinion. It seems from researching that a number of experts believe that the hand former Governor Rick Snyder and the legislature that approved this law a few years ago, reinforcing dealership protections on an almost unanimous bipartisan basis, is eventually a losing one. The state may have seen fit to settle this to ward off a direct challenge of the dealer protection law that very well could have gone down in defeat. Let's be real, removing dealer protections would send massive shockwaves through the Michigan economy and Lansing. Michigan's 600 or so franchised auto dealers also employ more than 36,000 people in the state. They buy lots of local ads, fund kids' sports teams, all of that stuff. And they also have a lot of lobbying power. But experts I've talked to on background have told me that with today's technology, car brands don't really need the number of dealers that exist to properly service people, and that in fact, you could do what Tesla's doing and send crews out for minor repairs and maybe have a dealer every few 100,000 people. So here's the rub. Those inevitable job losses, no lawmaker or governor wants that pin put on their donkey. To me, it isn't a question of if this change is coming, it's when. Consumer preference is to buy online or streamlined in person. And I think this legal maneuver by the Attorney General bought the current system some time, but I don't think it defused the bomb. Detroit's casinos are generally doing well, posting record revenues of nearly $1.5 billion in 2019. That's up slightly, $10 million from last year. The big winner is MGM Grand. They've cornered 43% of the market, following as Motor City Casino, then Greektown. The Detroit casinos sent nearly $118 million to the state in the form of taxes last year, and it's going to be interesting as sports betting is going to open up sometime around March Madness this year. It's anticipated to bring in another $19 million to the state. The area set aside for Ralph C. Wilson Centennial Park, known before to some as West Riverfront Park, is about to get $2.5 million dropped on it to clean it up. It turns out that portion of the Detroit River is a toxic hotspot, or what they call an area of concern. It's one of 43 in the Great Lakes Basin. The agreement means that the EPA will evaluate and develop a plan to remediate contaminated sediment along the shoreline of the 22-acre park, just downriver from the Rensen. If you haven't been, it's right behind that giant post office facility on 4th Street, roughly between Rosa Parks and 8th Street. There also will be a fisheries habitat restoration in a cove, which, if you've seen the plans for Wilson Park, is a pretty neat idea. The Detroit Riverfront Conservancy is going to pay $900,000 of the bill, with the rest handled through a Great Lakes Legacy Act cost-sharing partnership. Some stories require context, and so that's why I wanted to take a moment to talk about some news from the city of Detroit. That property values, on balance, are up a whopping 20% over the last year. A map, which we'll include in the show notes, shows that almost every neighborhood in the city saw a property value increase. This, on balance, is a good thing. But I'm going to point out a couple bits you should know, and part of why I decided to hold on telling you about it until today. First off, and crucial for existing residents, even if property values are going up by this, say, 20%, it's going to be the next owner that sees a big bump in their taxes, not current ones. Thanks to a state law, the cap on how much your taxes can rise each year is tied to inflation, in this case, about 2%. Here comes the context. Although property values have risen about 20% this year and similarly last year, the city has nowhere near recovered to pre-recession levels. In 2008, Detroit's housing stock was estimated to be worth $8.8 billion. In 2018, just $3 billion. So when people say there's a lot of upside to the neighborhoods, there are billions of dollars in home value to go before we get back to even. That wipeout of wealth, and especially people of color, was astonishing. That's not even counting the $600 million plus, conservatively, that Detroit homeowners were overcharged starting in 2010. Although property values going up is a positive step, there is a long way to go. On to the next story. The city of Detroit plans a major overhaul of McNichols, known to most of us as 6 Mile, in the Fitzgerald neighborhood. Think just west of the University of Detroit Mercy. The project from Livernois to Greenlawn is planned to start in the spring and finish up this year. This is part of a second round of streetscape improvements. The first round was on Livernois, Bagley, and Grand River streets. This isn't the first project in the Fitzgerald neighborhood either. Longtime listeners will know we've covered homes being constructed, as well as a new park and greenway connections. Residents should expect to see new sidewalks and pavement, on-street parking, enhanced transit stops, benches and pots and plants, a protected bike lane and scooter lane, plus an expansion of the MOGO bike share program. That's something we've talked about for a while, but has been held up in various places, including suburbs like Oak Park, as the infrastructure needs to get done before MOGO deploys more bikes. Joining me on the line is Mark Rieth. He is the owner of the Detroit-based Atwater Brewery, who is in the news this week as there's a newly announced plan for Molson Coors, through their craft beer operation 10th and Blake, to acquire them. Mark, welcome to Daily Detroit.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
All right, so let's set the table first. You're a Detroit-based brand. In case people don't know, or they're listening to this and they're not deep into the craft beer scene, let's set the table. When did Atwater get started, and why did you get into the beer business?
Sure. Yeah. So the brewery was commissioned in 1997, and I invested in 2002, and then took the operations over in 2005. I got involved with the beer business, obviously for the love of beer. That's the first thing. And then I started home brewing when I was living in Boston. Prior to the beer business, I was in automotive and was living out east, and wanted to make a great Boston lager in my basement, in the early 90s when that started becoming popular. And when I moved back to Detroit in 97, I was lucky enough to stumble across Atwater when it originally opened, and wanted to start a business in the city of Detroit, and just fell in love with the idea of getting into the beer business.
Well, and one of the things I enjoy about your brand is you have a lot of local tie-ins. Not only do you have like your local breweries and what I guess you could call them restaurants as well, that are in a few locations around town, but even little details like using folks like Tony Rocco for the label art. I think it's kind of been a nice signature as you guys have grown to keep including like local ties into what you're doing.
Yeah, that was always been really important when we took over the brand and kind of rebranded the look. And Tony did a one-off label for us, and we absolutely loved it and said, you know what, let's continue with this. And we did that with kind of all of our mainstay and seasonal brands over about a year and a half span of time. And we're still continuing to do that. And Tony's just a great person, individual, and very philanthropic, and everything that we're about supporting local. And it's been great, and that's going to continue, which is awesome. That's one of the main reasons that when we were talking to Molson Coors, they really loved our brand, our culture, and that's going to continue.
So that kind of leads me to my next question. Like the craft beer is a super crowded space, and yet undeniably you all have been able to like cut out a strong niche for yourselves. So why sell?
Yeah, great question. And obviously there's a transaction involved, but for us, and we saw a couple of years ago with the headwinds in the craft beer industry and the double-digit growth rate nationally slowing to single digits. And us as a regional brewery, we're in a unique spot. There's 300 plus breweries in Michigan, and very good ones, and there's small, there's large. Us in the middle, it's really difficult to continue that distribution and growth. model. We looked at private equity and kind of growing that in, but really finding a strategic partner is a win-win for us. And what Molson Coors has done with its other acquisitions and partnerships over the last years, I go back to the Leinenkugel one was 30 plus years ago, and you still have the family members running the operations today. And that's what excites me for my brand, my employees, my family, for down the road, decades to come, that we're still involved in growing not only this brand, but the Detroit image.
Well, and we'll get into a couple other beers in their portfolio because I think it's an interesting family that you're going to be sitting with. But I got to ask, like, why? Because we've seen so much news around craft beer in town lately. Why is the middle so hard?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you have the middle range regional players that are involved with the distribution side and getting heavily involved in distribution, but you have the bigger players, the larger companies that are pushing down on you, and then you have all the new entrants, the little ones, smaller ones. I don't mean little, but smaller ones that are kind of growing and want to get into distribution and are kind of nipping at your heels. So it's that sandwich effect. And so I think that our world as a regional brewery is very different than the smaller brewer that's just trying to grow and local and trying to get some initial distribution. We've had to pull out of 10 states a couple of years back and kind of retrench, and it's worked really well for us and really concentrating on the Midwest. And this is going to help us bring more of our Detroit-made beer to more craft beer drinkers, and we're excited about that.
Well, and you are going to be sitting next to some pretty well-known names like Blue Moon and Leinenkugel and St. Archer. How do you think that Atwater fits into that portfolio?
Well, one of their main strategies is obviously geographic, and so we fit that geographic scenario for them. And I think in any deal or any transaction or any partnership, it has to be a win-win 100% on both sides, and that's what we have. So it fit their geographic mold. It also is great for us. Now we get to collaborate with these great craft breweries nationally, Revolver in Texas and St. Archer in California and Hop Valley out in Oregon and Terrapin down in Georgia. We're all going to get together, on a quarterly basis and share ideas and really grow our brands. And their brands have really grown. They were collectively up 16%, for their craft division last year, which is tremendous and much higher than the national trend.
That leads me to, I think, what will be my final question. So what's the plan with what's changing? I think you talked a little bit about that the collaboration, and then, from where you sit now, what's staying the same? Because I think a lot of people, they have concerns. It's that reflexive thing of, oh, well, it's a bigger company. There's going to have to be a bunch of changes. You've been pretty clear in what you have been getting out there that when it comes to the product itself, there's a lot of focus on keeping it consistent.
That is absolutely 100% true, because there's no way I would have even entertained anything other than that. And that's what the other breweries that have been involved with this partnership with Molson Coors confirmed all that. And what they're going to bring to the table is, their buying power, all those great things that are going to help us out, access to market. But they want to leave us to what we do best here and just help out. And that's what they've done with their other craft brands. And I mean, Dirty Blonde's Recipe, Vanilla Java Porter, all those they're staying the same. They're still going to be made in Detroit, where they've always been made. That's never going to change. So what we're going to be able to do now is innovate more, be more creative. The Beyond Beer space, what we've started with the hard seltzer brands, those are things that are exciting as we, kind of morph into that fuller beverage company. And you really need to do that. And to grow, having a strategic partner like Molson Coors is exactly what the Atwater brand needs. And we're still going to stay local and be true to who we are and provide our customers with the best made products.
Well, Mark, thanks for coming on Daily Detroit, and cheers.
Cheers to you. Thank you.
All right, thanks for listening. We try to keep the promo stuff to a minimum, but I do need to share the reminder that your Daily Detroit is mostly people-powered. If you want more coverage like this, be sure to become a member at patreon.com/dailydetroit. We're working to sign up 18 more members before we hit our 500th episode. And I'm not sure, but I think we're at like 421. They all kind of blur at this point. Well, that's all I've got for you today. To get this in your feed before drive time, I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and I'll see you around Detroit.